Is established titles a scam? That is what's going around on everyone's YouTube feeds at the moment, and I want to talk about what is being used both as a weapon and a shield of defense in this matter, and it is language. If you're new here, I don't normally talk about scams or shady companies or finance. I talk about language, languages, how we learn them, that kind of thing. If you're old here, don't worry, I'm still going to talk about languages on this channel, and this video is still a language video, sort of. But this particular controversy sparked my interest because it concerns two things that I have slightly more authority to talk about than most others, and those are language, and in this case specifically the English language and how it's used, and Scotland. Now, on the Scotland front, I don't have much more authority than the average person, but I know someone who does, and we're going to talk to her later in the video. But first, let's discuss the language here and how it is used and how it is not used, or how it should not be used, because this whole thing, established titles and other companies saying that they can sell you the right to use the term lord or lady due to owning maybe a tiny portion of land in Scotland, in my opinion, is a scam. And when I say scam, I don't mean like, oh, they could be clearer, or I think they're being a little bit sneaky, but it's all in the name of fun. I mean, it's like one step lower than a Nigerian prince who wants to leave you his entire fortune if you'll just give him all of your details. It's like one or two rungs down from that on the scam ladder. And I know that the opposition to that point of view says, well, it's obviously a gag gift and it's meant for stupid people, and if you really ever thought it did anything, then you're just a sucker. Well, I disagree. I think you're either conflating two different positions, or you're even more naive than the people that you claim to be more savvy than. What I think is happening is that a lot of people are conflating these two positions. Position one, I'll buy this for my sister who loves all things to do with tradition and medieval history and nobility, all that sort of stuff. She'll think it's funny, she'll put it on her wall, she'll think of me whenever someone asks her about it, and she'll be able to tell them that she is in fact a lady, because even though, no, it doesn't really do anything in the real world, even if you are in Scotland, what I'm purchasing for her is the nominal title of lady. Nominal meaning in name only. The root word nom is found all over the place in the English language. Words like nominate, nomenclature, misnomer. It also has some more distant relatives like onomatopoeia and noun, as in the name for something. So that's position one. Then there's position two, which is something like, as Lady Catherine of South Carolina, my sister will be legally entitled to have peasants bow before her as she rides her carriage to Walmart, and if one day she should visit the homeland, Scottish royalty will be there waiting for the honour of presenting her with her family tartan, before they then discuss how she intends to divide her vast acreage among the clans. Look, I get that I'm obviously wildly exaggerating position two, but this is my point. Those people saying that everyone who bought it, or even considered it to be somewhat legitimate, are naive, gullible, stupid, whatever, seem to be placing everyone in the basket of position two. Maybe it's a dialed back version of that, sure, but they still assumed that everyone who bought it or even thought about buying it thought that it would do something. But my view is, from what I've seen out there, is that about 90% of people, even those who actually purchased it, would actually be in position one. That is, they understand completely what a nominal title is, and they don't believe that they're going to turn up in Edinburgh and demand, I don't know, 100 head of cattle or a selection of kilts or something. But they also understand the purchase to be what established titles conveyed it as being, a nominal but nonetheless official title.
For officially becomes what's known as a laird.
That is to say, a title that does nothing but is still legitimate. And of course we're here because it's recently blown up that even position one is incorrect. It's not a nominal title, it's just not a title. Picture it like this. I own a Volvo S40 and a Mazda 3. I am the owner of two cars, and there is zero question about that. I can ring the New South Wales state government and the transport department and say what cars are registered to my name, and they would tell me those cars with those plates. But when people ask me what kind of car I drive, I don't say, well, I don't want to brag or anything, but I actually have two, because I don't really. I drive a Volvo S40, so that is what I say. The Mazda is barely running, and I bought it very, very cheap in that condition for reasons nothing to do with transportation. Legally and officially, I am the owner of a Mazda 3. But I take that to be like a nominal thing. It's not really worth anything in my life or the real world, but it is to my name. And that is what I believe the majority of people thought that they were purchasing. Something that they couldn't use or really do anything with, but was nonetheless on the books. But with what has come out, it looks as though what they were actually purchasing is more like the equivalent of my Ferrari 458. That is, it doesn't exist. It's not on paper, it's not a nominal thing, it's certainly not a reality, but I guess I can show you that I do own a Ferrari with this nice certificate. And the reason that I think most people understood it to be something like position 1 is that that is what almost all of the language, both in the ads and on the website, implies. The language that they use to convey their message is very carefully chosen, or at least seems to me to be very carefully chosen to convince you that position 1 is reasonable and correct. And this is why I think that people who are lumping everyone in position 1 and position 2 into the same basket are in fact the gullible ones. They think they're clever because they never bought into this scam, which by the way is easy to say now, but now they're falling for the line that the company is peddling of like, oh, it was always just a gag gift. We never implied it was like a legal or official thing.
So they can call themselves a lord or a lady officially.
I land in Scotland, you are legally referred to as a lord or lady. So this, I bought a square foot of land where they're going to plant a tree. So you are legally referred to as Lord Liam.
And this is why language is important. Language understood in its context, and I don't want to sound too pretentious about this, but it is the very fabric of our society. And established titles and other similarly shady companies know this, and they're trying to use it against us. They're making statements, or having other people make statements about their product that within the context with which they're said can only mean a very specific thing. For example,
I'm officially a lord.
Established Title sells a title that can officially make you a lord or a lady. You will literally get a certification that makes you a lord or a lady.
when you hear legally and officially in that context, there's not much wiggle room for their meaning. Now, those words don't always mean exactly that. For example, it would be very reasonable for me to say something like, officially, Spanish is my sole target language now, although I do still have a bit of Swedish in my day-to-day. No one would hear that and reasonably assume that there's some state register somewhere of who is learning what language and that my name is in there as officially learning Spanish now, because no such register has ever existed. But if there is an official register of something, like for example, who owns which land and how much of it, and a commercial approved by the company itself says that by purchasing their product, you officially or legally will become XYZ, then it is 100% reasonable to think that that's what happens, even if it sounds far-fetched. And by the way, it doesn't sound that far-fetched. I know because last night I asked one Lady McLeod. I'm just interested to get your thoughts on something as a bit of a connoisseur of Scottish things.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Now, just one second. Who's Lady McLeod, I hear you ask, and why does she also sound Australian? Well, she's my mum, and she sounds Australian because she is, but unlike me, and I've mentioned this in a video before, she's a tragic for all things Scottish. She's been there, I think, 8 or 9 times. She's read hundreds of books, both fiction and non-fiction, set in or about Scotland. She plays one instrument and plays one sport. Can you guess what they are? Oh, if you said bagpipes and golf, you are correct. Less difference than it would at a trivia night, because it makes absolutely no difference whether you get it right or wrong.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
True or false, being the official owner of any amount of land in Scotland would make you officially, under Scottish law, a lord or a lady, a female.
I think true.
Okay. That's...
I think it's a laird. I think it makes you a laird.
As in basically the Scottish word for lord.
Yeah. That would be my take on it.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thing that it wasn't for trivia, because it's not true.
Okay.
And for those who have realised that me referring to my mum as Lady McLeod is deceptive, yes, well done. It is. See, there's an assumed context for all the language that we read and hear, and we often don't even notice it. It may have sounded to you like I was going to call a Scottish noblewoman. Like I didn't lie, but I didn't tell the truth either, did I? I did at least technically fulfill the language that I used, which is more than I can say for buying one of these lordship titles. Now, I must admit that I did stop the recording a little bit too early, chiefly because I couldn't find my tripod and I didn't want to keep holding the camera. But what followed was my mum showing some of the expertise that I'd hinted at earlier. Although she's never really claimed to be an expert on Scotland herself, she said that one of the things that had her leaning towards true for that question was that Scotland does have a lot of its own laws and they are separate to England, and some of them are very strange. For example, the only remaining private army in Europe is the Atholl Highlanders, and when she told me this and I looked it up, I found that they act as the bodyguard to the Duke of Atholl. Okay, now it's hard to tell if that particular one is a law or just a custom, but whatever it is, it's weird and it's in Scotland. Which brings me to the question of why Scotland, because there are quite a few companies cashing in on this, what they call a legal loophole that isn't actually a loophole. And although they're all separate companies, seemingly at least, they all claim that it's based on a Scottish custom or a Scottish law, and it's not really. So if they're going to be making things up, why not choose, say, Denmark or France? And I think it's for a few reasons, but I'm going to simplify it to two main ones. And the first is plausibility. Now, when you live in Australia, you have to understand that the entirety of the UK seems small. Like, I'm pretty sure I've been to farms bigger than that place. But nevertheless, Scotland is around 2/3 the size of England, but has less than 1/10 of the population. In other words, it is big enough and sparse enough that it seems reasonable that there would be a big plot of land somewhere that is being used for this purpose. And whether or not all these companies actually own enough land in Scotland to fulfill the orders that they get, well, it's difficult to say, but it would be harder to check in Scotland and certainly harder to know outright that they didn't own enough land for that than if it were in England. And then you've got what I would call historical plausibility. As my mum demonstrated, it's possible to know a lot about Scotland, yet upon hearing that Scottish landowners are referred to as lords, ladies, or lads legally, remember I did say legally, it's possible to think, yeah, that probably is true. And the second reason that I think they choose Scotland is linguistically, right? It hits a nice sweet spot of ambiguity and familiarity. And if you've watched much media from Scotland, you've probably heard the term laird, and at least if you're anything like me, you might have wondered, is that just the word lord but pronounced in a Scottish accent, or is it a related word, or is it an entirely unrelated word that just happens to sound similar? So when this so-called offer pops up on Facebook or wherever and seems to explain the whole thing, it's just familiar enough that it makes sense and just novel enough that you might find the $100 or so that they're asking to get that bit of rustic familiarity that you know from Netflix to be kind of an appealing offer. By contrast, I think if you tried the same tactic in the even more spacious Sweden, where it'd be a lot harder to check if they actually own enough land, it might appeal to some people, but you'd probably turn a lot of people away with some of those icky foreign words. And you'd also have to say something that wouldn't sound as immediately familiar as lord, lad, or lady. And because it didn't ring true in your target person's head, it might lead to Googling. And we wouldn't want that, would we? And to try to sort of bring my point back and wrap this all up in a neat little bow, the reason I'm even talking about this is that it genuinely annoys me when I see language used like this. I've tried to give you here at least a tiny little sense of how versatile language can be, and there are so many interesting and genuine reasons to use the subtleties of language, and this is not one of them. Because upon what would be most people's initial exposure to them, that is their advertisements, they use certain words straight up incorrectly, like official, legal, lord, lady, they're all just wrong. And then on their website, or more like in their fine print, or if you scroll down a bit, they use a different register of language to obfuscate the fact that you're not actually getting what most people will probably think you're getting. And then, when they're called out on it, they again use language deceptively, saying that everything's always been out in the open, they've never hidden anything, and that's not true because they keep changing their website. Like, let's just take a moment to think about that fact alone. They are saying that they haven't changed anything, everything's always read exactly as it does now, but they're changing their website. I mean, alarm bells are ringing, Willie. And they also say, and this one really irks me, that it's a myth that anyone misunderstands what they're buying. Firstly, how could they ever know that for sure? But then, on separate pages, they're openly publishing reviews from people who seem to have misunderstood what they're buying and are therefore leaving glowing reviews. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm actually happy that there are people out there who are satisfied with their purchase. I do think that's a good thing. But going back to my car analogy, imagine if I bought what was sold as the official ownership of a Mazda 3. That is, you will be the registered owner of an actual car. Old and broken down it may be, you can't actually drive it, but it is a car and it will be registered to you in a real place. And in this analogy, I've never owned a car before, so I'm really happy when they send me a PDF with a picture of my car and I leave a glowing review about how cool it is to own a car and all my friends think it's cool and everything. It's all lovely, but it's still incorrect. And lastly, this page right here is straight up disgusting, and again, it's their abusive language that really annoys me. Response to allegations from non-customers, as if this somehow makes it invalid for those people to criticize them. I would suggest that there is a very good reason that those people are not customers. It's more of this deliberate manipulation of words with a suggestion that your customers are somehow better and more qualified to review you because they've paid $50 for a PDF or $80 for a physical copy. No, that's not how it works. I, as a non-customer, understand just as well as a customer what it is you're getting for your money here, because here is what you're getting. My message here is this. Language and languages, both your own and foreign, can be used for beautiful things. They can be used to make the world a better place, but they can also be used for this kind of stuff, and you should be alert. When you see things like weasel words, when you see people and companies making hard disclaimers against the exact words that they uttered, at the very least, ignore it. Don't get taken in by it, but even better, call it out. People should be aware of how powerful a weapon language is. Everyone around us is armed with it 24/7, and we don't even notice, and we're armed with it too. We need to be on the lookout for when it's going to be used against us and not let that happen. Anyway, if you made it this far through the video, you might want to subscribe, or maybe you don't. I'll see you.